Good afternoon, everybody. While the Zoom system starts bringing everybody on board to this webinar, we'll just give it another few seconds. We have lots of people registered from across the country and in fact around the world, I believe. So we'll get going very, very shortly. Maybe in the meantime, those of you that are on board, we always like to ask people to get used to, get their fingers warmed up and get used to the chat box feature, which we use a lot in our webinars. So please feel free to go into the chat box and say hello and where you're listening in from. It's always good to hear from everybody and see where everybody's calling in from. So either in the chat box or the Q&A box. And we'll be getting underway momentarily. I see that, yes, the numbers are scrolling in, so we're pretty much up to everybody that's registered. So good afternoon and welcome everybody to this webinar on a very important topic, downtown revitalization in the context of the COVID crisis. We're very pleased to be co-hosting today's webinar with the Canadian Urban Institute, and we'll be introducing them in a moment, and Ariana Holt, who's representing them. But to start, I'm going to first ask and introduce Natalie Bullard, the Executive Director of the Heritage Trust. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you very much, Rob, and welcome. Bienvenue, bonjour tout le monde. The National Trust has been hosting these bi-weekly gatherings really since late March, when the COVID crisis hit our country, and we've really been working hard to play that convener role to bring the sector together. We've had conversations that have focused on the impact on museums and historic sites. We've looked at the impact on the heritage industry. We came together through the course of these calls to develop a shared recommendation for government about how historic places can play a powerful role in economic recovery for our country. And I hope you've all heard about our Shovel Ready Heritage campaign and have been taking advantage of our toolkit online. Today, as Rob said, we're drilling down, looking specifically at the impact of COVID-19 on our traditional downtowns and our main streets, and pleased to be co-hosting with the Canadian Urban Institute. The CUI is leading a coalition of partners under the banner Main Street Action Network, and the National Trust is really pleased to be a part of that group. As Ariana Holt from the Canadian Urban Institute will tell us during the course of the session today, they've partnered with the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada to launch a national Main Street Design Challenge. And so we encourage all of our heritage advocates out there to be part of that and to contribute to the national design playbook for Main Street that will be the ultimate output of that challenge. In addition to Ariana, we have a number of distinguished panelists on the line today who will bring a national, a provincial, and a local perspective to the question of impacts on Main Street. Maybe just a few words on the next slide about the National Trust. So we're a national registered charity, and we take our role seriously as a leader for the sector, bringing people together to talk about important issues and to move together with key changes to the system that are essential to improve and level the playing field for historic places. The Main Street program and our interest in Main Street actually goes back quite a long way. Main Street was one of our earliest and I think most successful national programs. We started the Main Street program in 1979, more or less in parallel with the program in the US, starting with a pilot project in Perth, Ontario, and expanding ultimately to working in over 70 communities across the country. Maybe on to the next slide. The Main Street approach, and I think our colleague Jim Mountain will talk a bit more about how the approach plays out on the ground, but it's really a comprehensive strategy that brings together local actors, looks at design, the organization, bringing people together, marketing strategies, and with a focus on community economic development. So heritage is almost a stealth piece of the Main Street approach. And we really believe it's an approach that is as relevant and effective today as it was when it was launched in 1979. And in fact, the National Trust has been working quite recently on a Main Street program in the Cape Breton Regional Municipality in Nova Scotia. I think it's fair to say that the Main Street has really left a strong legacy across the ground, and you can see the impact the program in the communities where it was offered. Bridgetown and Windsor in Nova Scotia, Cambridge, Ontario, Moose Jaw in Saskatchewan, Fort Macleod in Alberta, Nelson in BC are just a few of the communities that benefited from the Main Street approach. And I think it has had a lasting impact on the distinctiveness and the authenticity and the character of those wonderful places. Interesting to note that a couple of years ago, the Environment Committee, House of Commons Committee, put together a set of recommendations for historic places in Canada. And one of their recommendations was about encouraging the federal government to consider a Main Street program for Canada to reintroduce a national federal interest in delivering that kind of program, recognizing the benefits that it could have for rural communities, small towns, to encourage investment in commercial buildings, lots of great potential benefits. So we're excited to have that recommendation on the record and to now be working with the Canadian Urban Institute and other partners, continuing to bring national attention to the needs and the opportunities on Main Street. So I think with that, without further ado, I'll hand the session back over to Rob Peugeot to introduce the panelists and moderate today's session. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. And we have a real awesome panel this morning. When we were talking about creating this webinar, we really wanted to have a sort of people with a pulse of what was happening, given so much momentum that's been created recently with the Canadian Urban Institute. So to have Ariana Holt from the Canadian Urban Institute to talk about the multiple initiatives that are underway, being led by the CUI is wonderful. So welcome, Ariana. Then also from the provincial perspective, there's been a great deal happening, and the critical role of the business improvement associations and the Ontario BIA Association has been really leading the charge on a number of fronts, including the Digital Main Street project and an initiative that they led. And we're really happy to have both Kay Matthews and Daryl Gillett, from the OBIA and the Digital Main Street program to talk about the lessons learned, some of the challenges, and how that's been going. Because that's something that, and there's some great news in terms of the Digital Main Street and the expansion of that very recently that Daryl will tell us about, which is great. My other colleagues are also on the line. Natalie will stay here on the line, of course, and Chris Weeb from the National Trust is also helping out because we really are hoping that during the presentations, you guys can have comments, questions in either the chat box or the Q&A. And again, encouraging people to sign in and just say hello and where they're signing in from. We see there are people from Ankara, Turkey, and across Canada. So welcome everybody. And do, when you send in your comments in the chat box, please do send them to all panelists and all attendees so everybody can see the questions being raised. It'll be a lively discussion. So, but first we thought, and the final panelist that I'm going to introduce is our colleague Jim Mountain, who's an associate, the Downtown Revitalization Advisor for the National Trust. Jim has been involved with downtown revitalization for a very long time, and I'm trying to be polite here, Jim, in how I'm presenting this, but you were right at the forefront of the Main Street revitalization movement in the 1980s when this national program was launched. So I thought we'd start maybe with Jim to give that perspective on that, how the lessons learned from those programs that have evolved over time and where we are now today within the Main Street movement. So Jim, I'll stop sharing my screen and okay. You can start sharing yours, and we will gladly hear your pearls of wisdom from Main Street revitalization.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Okay. Yeah, I was part of the original pilot project demonstration phase, I guess, working in Fort Macleod, Alberta, and then in the mid-1980s, worked across Western Canada from Whitehorse to Winnipeg, and from Ladysmith, BC to even Yellowknife, and all points in between, helping municipalities and communities develop their Main Street approach. The people that we had working in that program were all locally employed, either by the municipality or by a coalition of business community organizations. And it was very people oriented. I guess there's a technical side to this, but there's also a huge amount of people skills involved. There's a lot of empathy, a lot of passion, compassion, caring for the community, and it just sort of evolved from that point. So I just wanted to touch on a couple quick things. I could talk at length, as you know, and all of this, but a lot of big issues, you know, it affected main streets and commercial districts over the years. There's been shifting economies, impacting many thousands of commercial and institutional buildings. We have a wealth of these assets, you know, from Newfoundland to the West Coast and the North. It's just amazing. Online shopping, big box stores have impacted. Amalgamation in some regions has kind of hollowed out downtowns where development can go along highway corridors. 401 is a big example of that. And then just, you know, fragmentation is, I've seen that happen, and where leadership is so critical in all this and big picture planning, that's what Main Street is kind of about as well. And now it's this whole situation that we're all in, you know. There's been a net loss in some cases of at least 75% of our revenues. It's affected, you know, it's amazing. This whole thing has affected every single municipality, every community at the same time. When we did Main Street back then, there was some places were, you know, in better shape than others. And but I would say that right now, this is a universal issue that we're all in it together, basically. It is a North American-wide initiative. I went to the U.S. and took Main Street training down there. It was quite something to partner in on that with myself and Gord Fulton from Moonstar. We're the only two Canadians. They put us on stage and got us to say out and about, and they all found that humorous. And then, but maintained the link ever since. And you can see too that the Main Street America, the Main Street Center of the U.S. National Trust for Historic Preservation is really addressing this issue as well. So I would look to them too for some really interesting advice and hints. Natalie talked about the approach that we've had. We learned that, yeah, there's 4 key elements, 4 key points, but we also added in, as time went on from lessons learned, there's a whole sort of aspect of social dimension and sort of the cultural development dimension to this. It's based on the community's vision and goals, certainly. We work with that very much from the ground up, from the bottom up, as we used to say, in terms of a lot of input from all sources, all perspectives. We recognize too that we're part of a long chapter of history, that we go back pre-contact. Indigenous culture is so much a part of the narrative, that we start there and we bring it right up to the present, and use that as the basis for building identity and planning and marketing and organizing and taking action, the story of each place. An adaptive and creative use of older and historic buildings is really a key underpinning to the approach as well. So I'm going to make a case here for the who I call the frontline workers. I'd like to see, and this is my little rant, personal rant, so forgive me, but I really like to see support and advocacy for those people. Kay knows who they all are because she hears from them every day. And I was one of these people, so I got a taste of it. It really is a 24/7 job. You never leave it, even on, you know, weekends or a social occasion. Somebody's always coming up to you and saying, oh, we got a problem here, there's an issue there, what do you think about that? So it's the Main Street coordinator manager. They could be in a BIA, a BID in Atlantic Canada, BIZ in Winnipeg and Manitoba, BRZs in Alberta, or they could be a kind of a non-formal association representing the municipality. But these people, and I make the case that it really is a profession unto itself. It's an under-recognized profession, but any point in the day you could be dealing with real estate, transportation, engineering, marketing, finance, fundraising, events, the architecture, urban planning, preservation side, and just liaison to government. You're connecting people, and there's safety, accessibility, social issues, justice, homelessness, opiates, all kinds of things. You're a trainer, mentor, and you're a listener. You're almost a psychologist at times. All of these things roll into your skill set. And so just, I think what I want to leave you with is just some thoughts about how this COVID situation has had an outsized, profound impact on our downtowns collectively. And if we can make some effort to make immediate and tangible support for those frontline people, and I include the managers, coordinators, and also the business people, that really could get a huge benefit, a huge step up from the stimulus funding for construction-ready building rehab projects and the salaries of downtown managers and just that kind of support. I'm really worried about them that way. That business people are not going to be penalized or evicted because of what's happening, and that the whole digital Main Street initiative is that if we can make that universally available, I find that that's an exciting application that could have a set of tools that could be really beneficial to every community that we have. And just think about the training and the professional development of these people in the front line. We had a 2-week intensive, I would say 4th year university level comprehensive course that we trained everybody in. And so everybody kind of became really well versed in the approach. In Saskatchewan, when we worked there, we also involved board members and committee members in the training. And I found that was so critical, that sort of investment in people. So I want to leave you with those thoughts and look forward to the discussion here today. Thanks for your time and attention. And that's me.
Thank you, Jim. That's great. And it's one of those great lessons learned is that about downtown revitalization, Main Street revitalization is about collaboration. And it's multifaceted, and that's why our next speaker is extremely well positioned to talk about how that is informing where we're heading. And nice plug in there too, by the way, Jim, for Daryl's work and asking for money, big money for making his, his project national. So I'm sure Daryl appreciates that. So Ariana, thank you again for joining us, and for and we're really interested to hear everything that's happening at the Canadian Urban Institute. And again, encouraging everybody, if you have questions for any of the speakers or comments, please put it in the chat box, and we can raise it right away with the presenters. So Ariana, turning over to you to share your screen and talk to us about the great work of the Canadian Urban Institute.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll share my screen in a minute. But thank you. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be part of this panel and be working with the National Trust. As we're diving into research around Main Streets, we absolutely feel like the principles that were, part of the Main Street program years ago still are very, very much relevant. And, really, I think the work that you've done, Jim, lives on, so I think it's a really important message. For anyone who doesn't know, Canadian Urban Institute is a national organization that houses the best in Canadian city building. We say we're in the connective tissue business, so we work to connect policymakers, urban professionals, business leaders, community activists, and academics to learn and share and collaborate with each other all across the country. And we do this through research, engagement, and storytelling. We've been very busy trying to help communities and municipalities and governments respond and understand the COVID, and we've created several different platforms, including City Share Canada, City Watch Canada, and City Talk Canada. You may have seen some of our webinars that have been happening over the last few months, so I encourage you to check those out if you haven't seen them already. Bring Back Main Street is one area where we decided to really take a deep dive and to help, again, respond to COVID. I'll start to share my screen now. Just give me a second. Sorry. It's just not showing up. 1 second. There we go. Okay, I thought that I would, instead of creating a PowerPoint presentation, I'd take you through the Bring Back Main Street website, sort of an interactive demonstration just to keep people awake. So this is Bring Back Main Street. It's a nationally coordinated research and engagement campaign. Our focus, we have 3 goals. Our focus is on helping Main Streets recover and come back from COVID more resilient than ever. We have 3, the program really has 3 main goals. And the first is to build connective tissue, is to create those partnerships across the country to help people, again, to learn and to share in order so that we can all better respond to COVID. The second is to inform solutions and decision-making across levels of government and among various Main Street stakeholders. And the third is to influence public attitudes. So at the end of this, we're also hoping to develop a public campaign to encourage people to come back to their Main Streets, understanding, what we've said a few times is that we think, businesses won't necessarily help Main Streets recover. It'll be the people, it'll be the customers, and that's a really important component of this from our perspective. So when we're talking about Main Streets through this initiative, we're thinking of all different types of Main Streets. So that includes business district Main Streets, like the Main Streets in downtown areas, also neighborhood Main Streets, the places that are close to your home, perhaps where you go for your daily needs, and also small town Main Streets, those sort of typical heritage, focused Main Streets that are so wonderful and all across Canada. And one of the first things that we did through this project was to figure out why Main Streets matter and why we thought that this was important. And I think that those there's 5 points that we've come up with, and those I think very much align again with the work that the National Trust has done in the past. So Main Streets matter because they're drivers of the economy. They are hubs of commercial activity and are sort of a concentration of jobs. They're also hubs of social and cultural activity. So they're places that we go to interact with each other. And that's really important for the health and vitality of our neighborhoods and our own, quality of life and well-being. They support community and health and safety. So they are, even pre-COVID, they were, places that would allow for biking and walking, less car driving and carbon reduction. And then, during COVID, they're also important because they allow people to, walk to amenities and get things that they need for their daily life without necessarily having to go on transit or drive in a car. So that's a really important thing to consider as well. They support community resilience. So they're places where people can interact and they create a sense of trust with the people, with the sort of the shops and the shop owners in their neighborhood, and they can interact with each other and create that really strong sense of community. And also they help to keep dollars within the community, keep them locally. So we're not sort of supporting international, companies, but we're supporting our local businesses. And lastly, they provide value for investment. So they are, it makes sense to put our investment behind Main Streets. So that's just some background, I think context setting for the initiative, which I thought was an important place to start. And I'll kind of go through a little bit more of our website here. So a key part of the Bring Back Main Street project is our action network, which Rob and Natalie mentioned that National Trust is a part of, and Kay Matthews of our OPIA is also part of our Main Street Action Network, and it is just a group of partners, associations, and organizations all working together, working on Main Street recovery, and we bring them together and we try to share information and work together to solve problems. So we have regular meetings and we share information with those partners. We're developing these memos, we're calling them rapid research. So, at the end of this, we're working towards an action report and some solution briefs that will come out with some recommendations for various levels of government and other stakeholders. But in the interim, we wanted to continue to release research that was relevant and to help inform the conversation. So that's what we're doing through our Main Street memos. This one that we just released today is called Reallocating Main Street Space to Support Community Well-Being. It's really interesting. Encourage you to take a look. It's a really, I think, important part of the conversations that we're having is about how important it is to give space for people on Main Streets in order to make them feel comfortable on their Main Street and in order for them to then support their local businesses. And how do you do this in a safe way? How do you do this in an equitable way? How do you ensure that that the changes that we're making are accessible? You know, a lot of governments, local governments are making changes to reallocate space to people on main streets, but there's you know, I think a lot of them are still trying to work out what exactly that looks like and how to do it in the right way. So there's 7 main street memos there right now. I encourage you to take a look at those. We also have some resources that we've been collecting on you know, articles, data, research, etc., that would be relevant and to anyone looking at how to help main streets recover. We're also doing a series of block studies. So we've chosen 8 different blocks on the West Coast and some in the GTA, where we're doing a deep dive, kind of a hyper local portrait of what's happening on the street, and we're collecting data on those particular blocks, and we're really going to use that as a way to help inform the recommendations and actions that we'll be developing. I think, and then, you know, one of the things that we wanted to focus on in this conversation is on the design challenge. It's a really exciting initiative. As Rob mentioned, it's a partnership with the Royal Architecture Institute of Canada and a number of other supporting partners across Canada, including the National Trust. And this is an engagement effort for any Canadian who's interested in design to help us envision the future of main streets. So we're inviting professionals, planners, engineers, architects, designers, or anybody really who's interested in placemaking to come up with ideas to help us envision what the future of main streets can look like, and how can we use design solutions to help Canadian main streets recover. All of the solutions or the submissions will be included in an open source playbook, and that we're really hoping will you know, inform various, you know, players in this space to inform their work, and you know, really are trying to take a look to implementation and figure out ways, you know, through the designs, we're asking people how these things could be implemented, and we are looking to also support the implementation of the ideas as they come in. You know, there's no prize. It's not there's no winner, but you know, our thinking is really just that this is a, you know, real opportunity for people to come together and think about what the future holds. And it's really important that we engage the design community in trying to help think through what the recovery of main streets looks like. And these are all the wonderful supporting partners that we have as part of this initiative. And let's see, I wonder what else I can say about the.
And that's when we really want to plug the design challenge area. And for everybody that's listening in, that having a real good contribution, I think it'll be important that the heritage sector participate in that public dialogue about rethinking about what main streets can look like, and applying the conservation principles to that, but acknowledging that what things that have to change, how can they be done in a great way.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I think that, you know, your question to us is what can the heritage sector do? I mean, whether it's through this design challenge or other ways, I mean, thinking about what are the creative solutions to help our main streets and our cities overall recover from COVID is just really important. So there's three deadline cycles. That the first one is mid-July, and one in August, and one in September. There's a design brief. This is the design brief, so you can take a look at that. And there's some guidelines in terms of the types of things to be thinking about. You know, really a focus on sustainability and resiliency, and equity as well, and diversity, inclusivity. Those are sort of key things that we are encouraging people to think about through their submissions. I guess last thing I thought I would share is just some of the things that we've been learning so far about from our research. And you know, there's lots of different types of main streets, and not all main streets are faring the same. It's been really interesting through the block studies to see, you know, those main streets that have relied on daytime populations, tourists, and office workers, you know, large events, that they are really suffering. And, you know, or maybe if there is a, you know, they relied on a university population, for example, the local businesses on those main streets are really struggling. And so we have to think about the different, you know, policies and recommendations that would be for different types of main streets, and there's different sectors that are going to be faring better than others. So the restaurant sector is going to be particularly challenged. I mentioned that the space for people in the patios being something that we think is really important, and we're hearing that from BIAs and business owners that we're talking to, is like giving people more space to make their customers more comfortable. And but then also, how do we do that in a way that makes it easy for the businesses, not too expensive, so that the applications are not overly expensive to, you know, if they had, I mean, a lot of local governments are giving businesses the opportunity to expand their patio space, for example. But if there's a whole lot of application process and fees associated with that, then it's not necessarily going to be successful. Safety is something that we're finding is also really important. So there's, in some of the areas that we've been looking at, there's been a, you know, huge increase in safety issues and homelessness. And without that, you know, it's really a foundation of successful main streets. So we have to think about that as well. I think, you know, Jim, you were alluding to the same thing about the important role of BIAs, and I'll leave this to Kay, but we really, you know, it's just absolutely important. And the BIAs are, you can see how busy they are, and how much of a role they're playing in these communities. And then I think that the last thing that I would say, which answers your question. Am I supposed to answer your question now, Rob?
Or if you'd like to, sure, get the ball rolling and getting people.
It's an interesting thing about the heritage sector, and what, how can the heritage sector contribute to the recovery of main streets? And I think a really interesting opportunity is around local tourism. You know, a lot of people are not going to be traveling internationally this summer, and we're going to have to stay close to home. And but there's these wonderful small towns all across Canada, and they're great places to visit. And I think that there's an opportunity for these, for us to support local tourism as a way to promote the economic development, and also just give people opportunities to enjoy themselves this summer.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting. Everybody's learning and trying to be as responsive as the directives from public health officials change. I know for a while they're saying even those local trips, they're asking people not to go into the stores, but that'll probably be evolving, and the language will be changing around how to do that carefully is going to evolve in the very short term, most likely, especially with phase 2 now in place, at least here in Ontario. So regionally we'll have to really adapt. And I'll come back to a couple things that have been popping up in the Q&A, but perhaps it was a good segue into the business lens and the business association lens. And perhaps, so thank you, Ariana. And with that, well, maybe we'll turn it right over to Kay, because again, one of the key lifebloods of small traditional downtowns and main streets are the business associations and the businesses and their associations that direct so many of the initiatives that happen on Main Street. So Kay, great. I see. Thank you for joining us, Kay Matthews from the Ontario OBIA, Ontario Business Improvement Associations. And I'll turn it right over to you. Thanks, Kay.
Thanks for that introduction, and thanks for having me here today, Ariana. I definitely want to add a couple of things to why main streets are important to you. And one thing is the innovation that comes out of Main Street. And it is also one of the last bastions for entrepreneurs. So we really want to be able to foster that as well. So I'll add that one to your list. So yes, our BIAs have been incredibly busy over the past 13 weeks. OBIA has been as well. So the Ontario BIA Association, we have put out in excess of 60 e-newsletters to our BIAs and have held at least 26 best practice calls with BIAs across the province, where I moderate, but certainly they're coming up with the most creative, innovative ideas that I've ever seen. And it's just been a pleasure and an honor to work with them. So I've created a quick and dirty PowerPoint for you today, and I'm just going to walk you through it pretty quickly here. So, you know, as per the National Trust, there's the 4 pillars of downtown revitalization. They're still really relevant today, and they are leadership, economic development, marketing and promotions, and physical improvements. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't give a nod to the fact that this is the 50th anniversary of BIAs in Ontario. The whole idea for BIAs, which are now BRZs and BDCs, all of those other things, actually came out of the City of Toronto as a municipal tool that communities could use to actually self-fund themselves in order to do all of the work that BIAs do. And while it's a sad year to be celebrating our 50th anniversary, it's also showing how they shine and how important they are, to Jim's point about being the frontline workers in helping our main streets survive. So we kind of created a sort of a template for our BIAs to use around what they're doing in order to rebuild where they are now. So it starts with leadership. It starts with the idea that our BIAs didn't close up shop. They hit the ground running. They're going to have to update their strategic plans. They're going to have to do a lot of work to realize, that they're still really relevant, that they're still really needed, and that the levy that's usually collected through the municipality on their tax bill is more important now than it ever has been. And that's been a bit of a struggle that we've been dealing with along the way. Not only that, is that they're actually creating kits for businesses to use, whether it's the dots, whether it's the policies, whether it's the masks. You can see that they're very involved in that. So here's some samples of different things that BIAs have created over the past only 13 weeks. That is really helping to unify the area, starting to educate the customers and bring back Main Street. So here's one strategic plan. The economic development is a huge part. So online opportunities, and I know Daryl's going to talk about this and Digital Main Street and all the work that Digital Main Street through the Toronto Association of BIAs and our role in it, the Ontario BIA Association's role, but they've been setting up websites and marketplaces. So they've been setting up curbside pickup areas and gift card opportunities. They've been communicating with their members, and that's the key thing, is that communication has been really important. And of course, they've been working on some recovery teams as well. One BIA started and hit the ground running, and they created a marketplace for their whole downtown, which is Belleville. And certainly that is now happening across the province, where we've had these very hyper-local online marketplaces being created, and they're being created by BIAs as we speak. Other fun ideas that they've done. Again, Streetsville has done the same sort of thing. How about a COVID bingo? How about being so innovative and having a lot of fun about what we're doing? So let's keep that communication. Let's keep that positivity that our main streets still matter. This was obviously from Easter, so hop online and shop downtown Alliston. And then of course the marketing and promotions. And this is a challenge that we have had because BIAs in Ontario specifically operate more than 60% of all events that happen in the province of Ontario. And so there's a real challenge here where they're not able to do that. So they're pivoting, they're changing, they're reusing, or what to call that, adapted budgeting, and trying to figure out how they can still bring people together. And the words activation and animation are probably some of the key aspects of what we need to do. Of course, somebody has to cut their grass just when I'm doing this. So I hope you don't hear that lawnmower behind me, but it is what it is working from home. So we're really doing a lot of different work in the communications, in the marketing, positive stories that are being led across our provinces as well. Here's one where in Huntsville, where they decided to take sentences from great songs, just again to give that whole animation idea that our downtown is still vibrant, still alive, and will be ready to reopen when the province says it's safe to do so. So again, innovative and creative ideas, and of course, the physical improvements, that whole idea around the facade improvement area of our heritage buildings. But unfortunately, through this time, it's become much more grassroots. We've had a building broken into. One BIA specifically said that there has been a 113% increase in the amount of break and enters on Main Street because there just wasn't the security there. There weren't businesses there keeping an eye on their shops. So, you know, what are we doing? We are having to put hoarding up across businesses. We're decorating them. We're really participating in keeping our areas as clean, neat, and innovative and beautiful as possible. Of course, now our BIAs are able to go back in and start doing their flowers. Many of them were frozen with their winter decorations up. They've now been able to go back and decorate them for the summer and get ready for the staycation idea that Ariana spoke about, that idea where we can't necessarily travel, but we can reinvent and re-find the communities that are around us. And I've been very, very proud of the groundswell around bringing back Main Street. So just to use Ariana's terminology on that one, but there certainly has been a huge sympathy vote for the downtown because it's been very, very obvious as it moves forward. So here's Kleinberg, and in the bottom and the top left, you've got Oakville that have put out Muskoka chairs for your curbside pickup, and they're cleaning them in between each use, and just other signs of positivity that are not just about business, but it's about bringing our community together. And our BIAs in Ontario are really focused on the idea of we are community developers. We are professional people who are doing a professional job. And you're right, we're often underrated, recognized for what we do. Again, it was also mentioned that the patios, and this is a huge area that a lot of our communities are getting involved with. And the idea of actually combining. So in Hamilton, for instance, I think it's King William Street, all of the restaurants who are all side by side have come together. They've created one patio. The BIA stepping in to help doing the cleaning. They brought in summer staff to help do that. And it's all going to be put together. In Thunder Bay, we've just had a great one where they're going to take over a part of a casino parking lot and call it a street eatery. Or streetery, I think it's called. And they're also closing down half of their street. In Timmins, the Timmins, basically, she said, you know, normally you as a sponsor would sponsor our festivals and events this summer. We're not having them. So as you as a sponsor, would you sponsor some pop-up patios? And not only did they sponsor it, and they said, great idea, absolutely love that. We can actually store it because we're the mines. So we have lots of storage space for us to store your patios in the winter, remembering winter starts in October or September in some cases and goes right through to June. So storage is an important part for these patios that are being created and so on. And many, many municipalities are also waiving permit fees on patios, which is a great support and a great partnership that BIAs are often advocating for. So if I have a couple of minutes, I'm just going to take a minute and show you a quick video, and this will go really well into where Daryl's going. I think it's going to work. Here we go. Maybe.
Ontario is open for business, and Digital Main Street has opened doors and paved the way for digital transformation right across the province.
Our government is committed to ensuring our businesses are successful and competitive. That's because when small businesses succeed, our communities prosper. Think about the way consumers shop nowadays. They're looking on social media platforms, buying groceries at the tip of their fingers, on their phones, and getting them delivered right to their door. Main Street businesses have to compete with large retail chains that offer all these convenient shopping experiences and options. And that's no easy task.
That's because it takes knowledge, resources, and support that many small business owners just don't have. So OBIA, with the support from the province and in partnership with Tabia, extended a helping hand to Main Street small businesses across the province through the innovative Digital Main Street program. Many hands, actually. With the help of our digital service squads, training partners, and other Digital Main Street partners, we delivered digital transformation right to the doorstep of Main Street small businesses. We did this with training, resources, technical support, and, while funds were available, through grant funding. There were 100 squad member teams mobilized province-wide to provide support and trusted advice for downtown Main Street businesses.
So hi, Omegwin. My name is Sierra. I'm your Digital Main Street squad member. My job is to help you with your social media, website, and create a strategy that works for you to bring your business to the top. I've been working really hard with small town businesses in Goddard here to get them up to speed on some digital technologies that make their lives easier and make it easier to find online.
Together, OBIA and our digital service squads have reached over 15,000 businesses across almost 500 communities. That's translated to over $5.4 million in grant funding for municipalities and Main Street business owners who need it most. Best of all, this Digital Main Street initiative provided Main Street small business owners with the knowledge and the tools to continue pursuing the digital goals of their business.
Working with our digital service squad was excellent. Ben sat down with us. He showed us how to use Google Analytics. He also showed us how to boost Facebook posts, and then also came in to do a 360-degree view of our store that we added to Google.
The digital transformation grant provided by Digital Main Street is an amazing opportunity for businesses to maybe try something new as far as online marketing or social media advertising that they might not have had the opportunity to before.
I didn't have any idea what to do, how to put a business online. I was just kind of fumbling in the dark for a while and making a lot of mistakes. And with the digital grant, it was like so easy to follow the step by step with it. It was good. My online sales, for example, this month were up $2,000, which is great news.
This is Erin from Sweet North Bakery in Thunder Bay, Ontario. We have our full bakery and cafe, and we're very happy to get our Digital Main Street grant and work at optimizing our website for online sales.
The world is going digital, and Digital Main Street provided the assessment, training, and know-how to ensure Ontario's Main Street businesses are well positioned for the future and fortified to stay open for business.
That's great, Kay. Thanks. That's a great segue for to get, and maybe we'll move on just for the sake of time. But thank you, because I want to get to Daryl, Kay, but I do have a question to come back to you, Kay, on in terms of something that Eric Hansen from Peterborough has just raised about how cities are responding to the patios and public spaces, but we'll come back to that. But Daryl, Kay has just introduced Digital Main Street, which we are all huge fans of, and for many reasons, for the actual output, but also the broader implications of involving youth with entrepreneurs and the health of the businesses, et cetera. So turning it over to you, Daryl, to talk about the next phase and where things are happening with Digital Main Street. Oops, you're still on mute there, Daryl. There, there you go.
Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up. I lost the screen for a second. That's a little, I always hate when I have technical issues. It makes me look really bad right off the hop. But no, thanks guys for having me. I don't have a deck. I'm just a kind of a big fan of just making it more conversational. So really, what's going on with Digital Main Street right now, I think is a hot topic, and there's quite a few things. Is the short answer. The longer answer is we're launching 3 kind of concurrent programs that will all be live within the next month for sure. The video that you just watched was our past kind of 2.5-year, relationship with Kay and the team at Obia and the program there around the digital transformation grants, and the service squads and all that. So that's going to be going live July 1st. So we'll be relaunching that for businesses and communities. And then simultaneously, we're going to be looking at 2 other initiatives. So I'm just going to assume some people have seen the announcements that we've made regarding our Shop Here program. So that was our response directly to COVID. So for anyone who's interacted with Digital Main Street, you guys know that we approach business support in a very different way. And you saw, we work directly with businesses. We work, hand in hand with them. It's not, we're an anti-agency. We don't just kind of go in, get our marching orders and then disappear and come back with a finished product, where we focus on strategy, execution, knowledge transfer, capacity building, ensuring that the properties are getting built, the strategies are getting executed, but the business owners know how to continue down this path after the fact as well. So there is this kind of continued learning component. Much like every single person on this call has had to in some way, shape, or form, when all of this hit, we realized we needed to pivot pretty quickly. And we realized that we didn't have time to convince 3,000 business owners, which was our goal at the time, that they needed to go online and become transactional and be able to sell and engage their customers and all that. So we decided to slightly pivot our model. So what we did is we said, you know what, we're going to build them the websites, and then we're going to teach them after the fact. So we're going to take away that initial barrier of like trying to convince them this is what they need. We're just going to do it for them, and then we'll teach them how to use it and continue to be operational and run with it. So, and I mentioned, our initial goal was 3,000. That was when this was a Toronto only project, which was about 48 hours. It expanded very, very quickly to municipalities across the GTA. We had Mississauga, Markham, Hamilton, a few others come on very, very quickly. And then with the support of our friends at the federal and provincial levels, we did receive financial support to expand the program right across Ontario. So at this given moment, 12:53 p.m. on June 17th, any business that meets the basic criteria, which is, being a registered business, which is important too, because you can't actually sell on Shopify or an e-commerce platform without having an HST number and all that other stuff. And the criteria around number of employees. So less than 10 employees, if you're just a standard, storefront or something like that. And if you're in the food service industry, or, a very complex business like a fitness studio or something where you've got lots of part-time instructors kind of thing, where that number might be up to 25. We've left that open as well. So that's available right now, like I said, as of today. So if anyone on this call is a business owner and you want a Shopify store, sign up. It's digitalmainstreet.ca/shop here. For anyone else that works with businesses, just send businesses into the program. We're moving. We've built almost 1,000 websites so far, and we're continuing to go. So it's been pretty incredible to see the outreach. The third program that we'll be launching, which quite frankly is still in the design stage in a lot of ways, is going to be called Future Proofing Main Street. So similar and very complementary to a lot of what others have had to say on this call today. So we may actually be having some follow-up calls, but it'll be looking at, a bit of a hybrid of, everything that Kay has talked about, myself, but then also, looking at, what does Main Street look like moving forward? Are there new models of pop-up retail? Are there new models of, Kay mentioned multi-vendor marketplaces. Is that kind of a model that would be sustainable from a storefront standpoint? Where, you've almost got like a 1,200 square foot department store essentially, with tons of different brands and products and all kinds of stuff. So really kind of looking at some of those deeper level transformational issues, and also looking at industries that have been, essentially changed beyond the point of return. Looking at like live music venues, art galleries, places that aren't just going to be able to open up when they're told they can, and are really going to have to fundamentally change the entire way they look at their business. And it's no different right before this, and that's why I was a minute late, so I'll apologize for that. I was on a call with a coffee shop, and he's located in one of our underground locations here in Toronto called The Path, and he relies on the office tower traffic, and that obviously is non-existent right now. So that conversation was, how do you literally change your entire business model? So he's going more into food, more into delivery only. So looking at stuff like that. But the piece that I want to touch on, and this goes from Toronto to heritage areas to, Thunder Bay, to as far as we can go. I used to give a presentation, and I don't anymore because, I realized that I was really the only one who appreciated the title. It was called Amazon's Not the Problem, You Are. And what I meant by that was, it was a bit of kind of, to get everyone to look at me and, start pointing the pitchforks at me, but just pay attention. But the message behind that was, small businesses have always had this inherent advantage that Amazon will never have. Nor will Walmart with their Shopify announcement yesterday, or any of these big conglomerates. And that's the ability to build a true, authentic relationship with their customer. So whether you're a single boutique in Toronto, or you're a pizza joint in Thunder Bay or whatever, nobody in the world buys from Amazon because of brand affinity. Nobody does. Like, I don't think anyone wants to give Jeff Bezos more money. It's just, we do it simply because there are times where it's convenience and it's price, right? And those are usually the only two factors. There's no relationship there whatsoever. And what's really, really interesting is, with the programming that, myself, Kay, and our respective teams are going to do, and some of the other stuff, is up until this point, you've seen a lot of campaigns come and go around Shop Local. Some corporate chains have done weekly campaigns here and there, usually every year they'll do one. But what it's become in the past is more of a publicity stunt, I find, where, it generates this big buzz for a week, and then it doesn't really fundamentally change kind of that narrative, right? But what we're actually seeing now is, and I stand by this, I think that switch has flipped. I think this concept of Shop Local, which, all of us are big supporters of, is no longer just something that's going to pop up when, MX decides to launch a campaign and run it for a week. Like, we're actually seeing people fundamentally buy into this concept, which is super cool. And I say that because this whole idea of customer engagement and, building that relationship is more important now than ever. And it doesn't have to be, and I know I'm getting a little off topic here, but sorry, just super passionate about this piece, is, at a time when, like I said, we're seeing this fundamental shift back towards small business. These businesses need to take advantage of opportunities like the $2,500 grants that Kay and the team are going to be administering, like the opportunity to receive a free website through Shop Here, and all of these pieces. Essentially, what we're trying to do is take away as many barriers as possible.
I think the biggest question everybody's going to have, Daryl, is when do you go national? Like, when is the money going to come through to actually, because there's so many businesses across the country that can benefit from this. Have we been hearing anything as Ariana? Has there been anything at the national level that you've been hearing, or from an advocacy point of view, for funding for something like that? Do we know, Daryl?
So as Kay can attest to, I've never been someone that's been good at keeping secrets or saying more than I should. So I'm going to try very carefully here to literally think of every single word I'm going to say before I say it. We have had lots of very positive conversations, and I'm purposely going to be super vague here. We obviously have a ton of support at that level. We've obviously been working, very deeply in depth behind the scenes for the last 2.5 years at this point, with stakeholders right across the country. So whether it's, the folks in BC and their BIA community, or whether it's some of the economic development groups through our relationship with, the city of Toronto here and stuff like that. So the short answer is nothing official, Rob,
Okay.
in terms of timing or confirmation, but there's very positive signs.
Awesome. No, and we'll keep people informed about that, because it is it is an important piece, and time is really running along here. So there were a couple points that were raised, but perhaps, and I don't know if Kay, you noticed in the Q&A box, the point from Eric, but I think perhaps, because we just have a minute left here, I think one of the messages that has come out is all sectors of society right now are having to be nimble and pivot very quickly. And some of the practices around that social, the space, trying out certain things and seeing what is working. And sometimes there's a bit of a lag time between the public's response and understanding of new public health directives. So I think we're all working through it, but I think one of the principles of Main Street Revitalization is this collaboration. And I think all of you are doing that great work of proposing different components of that in your own way, and bringing people together to talk about it. I'm gonna quickly just put another screen back up, if I may. Just to thank everybody. I was going to mention quickly that the Rue Principale, who was in Quebec City, in Quebec, was to participate in today's webinar, but unfortunately was not able to. They have some great resources on their own website. They've had some public polling about the support of the public for Main Streets, and some other additional resources specific in French, including a webinar on Main Streets in the province of Quebec. So thank you. I'm sorry to have rushed through the end of this, but there was a lot of great resources. And as we mentioned in the chat box, everybody will be receiving a recording of today's webinar and the deck. So you will actually have those in your inbox very soon. just quickly, there are a couple things I just want to mention. Those of you that have been following these, we're still actively looking for all of our network to contribute to the identification of shovel-ready projects to really advocate for historic places and the importance of federal funding. So look up, if you just look up the hashtag or on our website and on our resources page, you'll see lots of that information. And there's more, we're continuing to put more stuff out there. There's another gathering of the clan in 2 weeks' time. Stay tuned for that on next Tuesday on the 30th. And even tomorrow, there's going to be a webinar on Canada's Historic Places Day tomorrow at 12:15. So we have lots of resources for everybody. So finally, just thank you again to all the panelists. Encourage everybody to check out Bring Back Main Street on this, the bringbackmainstreet.ca website, where there are lots of resources and all the great work of OBIA and Digital Main Street. Thank you, everybody. It's we're already past time, and I really appreciate everybody's super busy these days with all kinds of activities. So thank you, Ariana, Kay, Jim, Daryl, and of course, Natalie and Chris for helping out. So thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.